Hey there everybody, and welcome back to more Sword of Etheria. And so, after our trip through the Purgatory under Theologia, it's now time to see if we can't secure a rematch with the god that sent us down there in the first place. And right off the bat, we find ourselves in a very familiar location.
It doesn't look like that god is here anymore.
Yeah, this was the arena where we fought the god originally, though our trip back through this area of Theologia won't be the exact same as it was before. And it seems that they didn't expect us to make our way back because the guards they set up are pretty easy to deal with frogmen.
Here we go!
Yeah, I can only imagine the reason that they also set up that chest there at the start with that free 300 Etheria is mostly because this level can be pretty difficult to get the good Etheria ranking at the end. Especially when you have to deal with rooms like this one. Yeah, there are going to be a number of tricky rooms throughout this level. This one is especially so, not only because the enemies they have set up, but also because the deadly fire geysers that litter the floor. Normally, I find it best to not fight in the center of the room where all the geysers are, just because, much like the traps we saw earlier on in the game, especially dealing with fire, they do a tremendous amount of damage, which, coupled with what the larger enemies can normally deal out in damage, can be a pretty deadly combination. That's why I especially recommend taking out the larger rock gentleman first, because he will do the most amount of damage, and well, I find he is easiest to juggle amongst all these other enemies. As long as you are very careful and hug the walls here, it's not too terribly difficult. It's just your first time through, you're probably going to rush into the center there, and you're going to have a really, really hot time. But yeah, at this point in the game, you're hopefully getting down just, who to prioritize whenever you're fighting enemies. Normally, like I've pointed out before, fighting the smaller enemies is usually a good way to set up your tension gauge, get some death blows going. But more than anything, you want to make sure that if there are any ranged enemies, you also want to prioritize those because, well, as we've already seen in previous levels, the ranged enemies are starting to get more and more dangerous. Especially in this arena here, you see that there are even more flame jets, and they do make a good barrier to cutting off portions of the level. Especially when dealing with this particular ranged enemy, you want to get rid of him as quickly as possible. Also making sure to move him away from the torrents of fire along the side, because, as you can imagine, the enemies are slowly getting more and more difficult now that we're dealing with the fire-enhanced versions of the frogmen. And he would just normally be peppering you with long-ranged attacks, but keeping up with the death blows and the juggles kind of trivializes everything. Yeah, with a bit of overkill, safely making our way through this situation, and somehow or another, I think we managed to get up to the maximum multiplier, which is good. And even if you are having a difficult time, there's a little bit of health you can get over here. But speaking of prioritizing, This next room is pretty much tantamount to doing that because, well, we are given 2 squads of enemies at the start here, and I highly recommend not trying to take them all out at one time, because the next wave of enemies, from what I've been able to tell, is hooked up to each squad of enemies. So if you do manage to take down both of the simpler sets of enemies, yeah, you're going to be overwhelmed pretty quickly when the next set come out. I think this large rock asshole here was connected to the right side of enemies. But as long as you focus fire him down before you take out the other wave of smaller enemies, it can be a little bit more manageable, though you might be noticing we are getting pretty much constantly barraged with these fiery rocks, and, well, we are going to deal with those in a little bit, though they are from an enemy that is pretty unique to this level. And as you can probably tell, they are not only very precise, but very persistent. After we deal with this one final little minion here, you might notice on the mini-map and just in the general periphery, there are a couple of orbs on the rampways leading upwards. And, well, that does lead us into a very small optional section, which, for the most part, I would say just ignore. Because, as you'll see here, it's pretty tedious to deal with. Not so much in that it's difficult, even though it can be a bit difficult because you're dealing with ranged enemies on a sloped area, but more than anything, this small area just for some reason leads the AI to get pretty confused and just kind of walk off the edge. And yeah, your inevitable reward for doing all that, outside of maybe taking out the ranged cannons up there, is just a resurrection charm, which, not that great of an item, honestly. I'm probably not going to end up using it. It's pretty much just a one-use item that whenever you do get knocked out, it will immediately resurrect you, so you don't have to do a button-mashing action. But yeah, if you're wondering where the collectible was, it is hidden in these rocks that are now pretty much going to be continually falling down this slope here. Assume that Sisyphus is probably taking a smoke break in his journeys through hell. And I do like that they at least put some creativity behind where they hid the collectible in this level. But you can approach this particular slope in a number of ways. There are some preset waves that will spawn in whenever you make your way up, but, well, in reality, the rocks aren't going to stop, and while they don't do a lot of damage, they can be pretty annoying all around, so there is something else you can do outside of dealing with these waves of smaller enemies, because we can now see at the top of the slope here, just where all those rocks are originating. And while we can rush up here, it doesn't stop the waves from spawning. And some of those waves are pretty deadly to deal with, especially when you get closer and closer to the top. But yeah, I highly recommend getting up here as quickly as possible just to stop those rocks. And because, well, in reality, the way to get through to the next area is actually only attached to killing this huge rock guy. So if you are wanting to get through this level a little bit quicker, you can just focus on the large rock guy and make your way through, though, well, you are going to be missing out on some very tasty Etheria. Also, if enemies are becoming just too difficult to deal with, there's also a completely unguarded little drop-off to the left-hand side here. And you can knock enemies off into it, but well, I highly recommend getting that Etheria, because as you might recall, the upgrades getting super expensive, but yeah, that is honestly all of the level outside of the boss. We get a nice health pickup, and it's time to fight that god.
Looks like we won't be getting through so easily.
Don't worry about me. I won't let you down this time.
I can't believe it. I'm actually frightened. Me!
Galumn, stay focused!
If you let your guard down, it'll gain control. It's too soon.
Galumn!
Never mind me. I won't let myself become a burden. I just can't stand the humiliation. Enough! Enough!
What?
Galumn!
Calm down, Theo. We're talking about an Oz member, don't forget. Oz members don't die that easily. The important thing now is not to let anything happen to us.
I know. But what are we gonna do? Pull it together, you two! Yo!
Leon! You?
We can talk later. There's a little something we gotta take care of first. Kid, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Look at that damn smug expression.
I'm gonna rescue them. Dorothy and the other children. The Katinas and the Etheria too. I've gotta rescue them all.
Theo, did you do that?
Not too bad, kid.
Yes, you should be fine now.
Here we go!
So, though we did lose Galumn, more importantly, we've gotten back our hot-headed friend Leon, and even more importantly, we have gotten a nice new fancy upgrade in the form of that armor that we saw the Oz members wearing at the start of the game. And, if you can believe it, this isn't just a superficial upgrade, no, this is a wonderful upgrade that not only increases our damage, but it also decreases the damage that we take, and even more importantly, will cause our tension gauge to build up even quicker than before. And this is going to be exceedingly important because if you look at Tintoris' health bar up there, he has gained an entire new segment, which means we are going to need to do even more death blows than before. Otherwise, Tintoris hasn't really gained too many new abilities. You can tell here that the enemies he's managed to poop out of his backside are a little bit more dangerous, and really the rest of his attacks are pretty much the same, minus one that I will not be showing off just because, well, it's a little bit time consuming, though. A brief description is that we have seen that he can lift himself up using his rock jetpacks on his back there, but with this new ability, he will actually rocket himself around the perimeter of the arena, and he will rain down fireballs on us, but, well, the attack itself isn't really that dangerous, and it ends up taking about a good solid minute of just running around the arena waiting for him to swoop back down. So, just imagine that it's not as cool as it sounds. But yeah, with our newfound abilities, and the fact that we can easily do death blows more, especially level 2 death blows, this rematch with Centaurus is pretty much a joke. And really, I think that's for the best. I like a game that, gives us a gradual feel that we've increased in power, and, well, this is a very, very dead god. So with the gang all back together, a brand new power under our wings, and the first defeat of a god, things are finally looking up for Phil and his group, but still leaves in question just where is Dorothy? Maybe we'll find out next time.